At 3:30, we heard the natives pounding their cloth and bananas, and shortly after this, we caught sight of some huts and saw the natives peacefully at work. If the natives saw us, they would bolt, taking everything with them. We had thus no means of cutting off the retreat from the opposite side of the island. What could we do? For 3 hours we waited till darkness was coming on, and something had to be done. I decided to fire on the village from 3 places. I opened the game by shooting one chap through the chest. He fell like a stone, and was seen next day stiff as mutton. Immediately, a volley was poured on the village. At first, the natives ran, but rallying, they peppered us with their iron-tipped arrows, but without effect. For some minutes, we took pot shots at the heads as they appeared above the grass and huts. After all was quiet, some men swam across the channel and ransacked the place. The only things they found were some spears, dried bananas, and smoked elephant meat. It was most interesting, lying in the bush and watching the natives quietly at their day's work. Some women were pounding the bark of trees preparatory to making the coarse native cloth used all along this part of the river. Others were making banana flour by pounding up dried bananas. Men we could see building huts and engaged in other such work. Boys and girls running about, singing, crying. Others playing on a small instrument common all over Africa. A series of wooden strips bent over a bridge and twanged with a thumb and forefinger. All was as it was every day until our discharge of bullets, when the usual uproar of screaming of women took place. September 29th, 1887. About 9 o'clock, Stanley turned up with a boat and landed on the island opposite to look at the scene of the recent battle. They found some bodies in the grass and saw a lot of blood in the canoes.
This is the diary of William Grant Stairs, a Canadian who served in the British Army, and here he is part of the Emin Pasha Relief Expedition along with Henry Morton Stanley, who famously found David Livingstone in the middle of Africa. This expedition took place during the Mahdist rebellion after the rebels seized Khartoum, which had been ruled by the Egyptians beforehand, but now this rebellion split Egyptian Sudan in half, leaving Emin Pasha, the governor of Equatoria, trapped behind enemy forces. As the British had a vested interest in Egypt now, they sent the expedition, but it also served as an exploring mission to allow for colonization efforts in the future. Plus, Stanley had been employed by the Belgian king, and Leopold aided the expedition, seeing the benefits of further exploration in the Congo. Stairs and the other expedition leaders sailed to Zanzibar, and from there they travelled inland towards the Congo, travelling on boats often in terrible conditions, along with a number of local porters and soldiers. For this next section we'll go back in time a bit, a couple of months before Stairs slaughtered the villagers, but you'll see as he journeys down the Congo River, he had no problems with killing indiscriminately.
June 17th. Left last night's camp at 6 a.m. and put out a bit and made fast to an overhanging tree where we could see every movement of the natives. Stanley then went across the village, but all the Negroes ran away. Soon, however, they came back and there was a long palaver, and the natives would not permit us to land. We came over, all our men being ready to land, and my Maxim ready to murder them if they should dare attack us. We made a landing soon after, and frightened all the natives out and took possession. We got all sorts of curious paddles, chairs, work tables, charms and drums, and dozens of other things. June 17th. Up early, and all hand occupied on different jobs. I got a lot of men with hoes and shovels, and we commenced digging the ditch for the palisade. The palisade will be about 12 feet high, and from this point, the ground on every side can be swept. A white man with a Winchester would create immense slaughter among the natives, as here he would be quite safe from spears, and could single out and pod any skulking Negro behind a tree or bush. July 4th. Away 6:15. About 10 a.m., the advance guard had a brush with the natives, and I believe killed 2. I rode my donkey this morning for the first time. I have been carried 6 days in a hammock. July 21st. We started off today about 7 o'clock. I tried to catch some natives by hiding 20 or 30 men in the village the column had just left. We lay in the grass without stirring for making the slightest noise for half an hour, when 4 canoes made for the village, and after a good look around, 3 of them came ashore directly. From our hiding spaces, we watched their movements, and were almost making for them when one ass of a chief of ours showed his head over the side of a hut, and native, being quite close, poised himself for throwing a spear. This fool immediately got in a terrible funk and commenced to yell for help. Of course, the other Washenzi heard the noise and made for the river like lightning. We dashed after them, but they dived into the river. We had a few pot shots at them in the water. July 30th. Stanley came up with a plan to seize some of the natives. 10 men should offer cloth, beads, etc. to the natives, and entice a canoe in, and then grasp 5 or 6 healthy individuals to make them prisoners. The plan succeeded, in that 1 man was caught. This fellow I put in chains at once, and Stanley got a lot of information out of him. As soon as he was seized, all the natives commenced to yell with funk and rage and paddle up close to our camp for half a minute or so. Stanley fired into the air, when like lightning, every man, woman, and child dove into the water and swam off like some wild ducks. The specimens we've caught so far are very fine-looking men of 5'8" or so in height, well-shaped, and with powerful muscles in the arms and backs. August 12th. The old woman, our guide, turned out to be a liar. Park threatened to cut her throat and give her to the men to eat. She was terribly frightened by this, and then took them to a very good banana plantation. On nearing camp, we passed the body of one of my men who had evidently been foully murdered. This murder has caused a great stir in the camp. Stanley offers $100 reward for any evidence which will convict the murderer. One of the Sudanese soldiers was lost on the march yesterday. He has not turned up yet, and most probably has been caught and cooked by the natives. We left a sick man in a hut. He was wasted away to nothing, and would probably die in an hour or so. The pumpkins we got were quite small ones, but very good eating. August 13th. On nearing the village, we met some Washenzi, one of whom we shot. After we settled down in camp, we made ourselves comfortable. Stanley sent off some men to search for food, but these men were attacked by a large mob of natives, armed with spears and bow and arrows. Hearing the noise, I rushed down with my rifle to try a shot or two. The second killed a man. Then I was struck in the chest with a poisoned arrow, the arrow breaking and leaving about 1 inch of the point inside. The wound is just below my heart. The sensation at first is that of a knife being struck into one. Shortly afterwards, my sides stiffened and acute shooting pain set in my sides and back. On the evening, under morphia and opium, I remember nothing. August 27th. Stayed in camp all day. Luckily, we got a fine, bright, sunny day of it, allowing us to dry all our clothes again. I cleaned the Maxim gun up thoroughly and fired some 20 or 30 rounds at some howling natives on the opposite bank. August 29th. While moving up the river, a canoe with a single native in it shot out of a small creek and paddled down towards the bore. In an instant, this fellow saw his mistake and dove, but not before he got a ball through the back. In the canoe, we found a bow and 12 newly poisoned arrows, any of which would be sufficient to put an end to a man in 48 hours. Miserable, contemptible bushmen, lowest form of man. You have made yourselves our enemy, so look out. 18th of September. Fell all the men in early, weeded out the sick. I took the 56 6-men. We are leaving behind us 5 Somalis, 5 Sudanese, 46 Zanzibaris. What a great relief this getting rid of the sick will be to us. All the old crawlers with rotten limbs who took 6 hours to do a 2-hour march are gone. Thank heavens. We who toil along day by day through rivers, swamps, and mud we'll have a little work thrown off our shoulders, and perhaps the column will make better marches to the promised land, grass country. 20th of September. 3 of our men ran away yesterday, but were caught by the Arabs. Stanley ordered the condemned out and addressed them, telling them he would hang 1 man today, 1 tomorrow, and 1 the next day. They drew lots, and Membruki's lot was cast for today. Accordingly, he was tied and run up with the help of the prisoners in charge, and died without struggle in 2 or 3 minutes. I made the remaining 2 deserters fast to trees for the night, placing sentries and turned in.
Now we are back to the point just before he had slaughtered the initial villagers, and in this last section he mentioned Arabs, and throughout his diaries they feature quite heavily. These Arabs were slavers who knew the area really well, and they often worked with the expedition leaders throughout, giving them advice and, as you saw here, capturing runaways. As for Stairs, you'll see that he spent quite a lot of time being carried in a hammock because he was ill, but he would happily abandon his own men if they were to fall ill, and when food was available, he'd take a far larger share. Plus, towards the end of this next section, you'll see that he had no issue with taking slaves, despite the public backlash. And it should be said that he was heavily criticised when his actions were revealed. Stanley, for instance, said that his brutality slowed down the whole expedition. But despite all this needless murder, Stairs would later be employed by Leopold of Belgium during the Katanga expedition, in which he claimed it on behalf of Belgium. Once again, this involved a great deal of murder, but he was successful, and he added around 500,000 kilometers squared to the Congo Free State.
30th of September. About 4 o'clock, I heard firing ahead, and after 20 minutes or so came up on the camp and found that 5 Arabs had come down from their village some 4 days off to meet us. From then we learned something of the country ahead. We are 4 days off from their camp, which they say is many days from the big Arab camp on the edge of the bush. They are all young-looking wanderers, plump as butter, and seemingly perfectly content with their position. From here to their camp, they say there is nothing but very few banana plantations. Our men, already reduced to eating anything they can pick up in the bush, will have a terrible time of it for 3 days in the wilderness. 10th of December. Again this morning, we endeavored to make friends with the natives, but gathering together on small groups on the hills, they came closer and closer to us, hooting and menacing us. Accordingly, at 10 o'clock, I took 50, and Jeffson took 50 men. And falling out in different directions, we cleared the natives from before us, and burnt every hut and granary over a large area of the country, returning to camp at 2 o'clock. The natives now were standing in groups high up on the hill, watching their houses burning away. Towards evening, they again got too noisy, and again we sallied and burnt more houses and cut down plantations of bananas. No attack at night. 11th of December. Out again at the natives, burnt more houses and cut down more bananas. This time, we went further up the valley and devastated the country there. In the afternoon, we went up to some high hill at the back of the camp, burnt all we could see, driving off a lot of natives like so much game. The natives now must be pretty sick of having their property destroyed in the way we are doing. But it serves them right, as they were the aggressors, and after taking our cloth, fired on us. 25th of June, 1888. 2 men ran away yesterday on sentry and have not returned. Both were under punishment for sleeping on sentry. My punishments are as follows: flogging up to 100 strokes, and in addition 1 month stone drill. Then of course, any combination of these downwards. Tying up a man till he is repentant. Standing in one position up to 2 hours with a heavy stone on one's head. This they dislike most of all. Stone drill means the marching up and down in the square 4 hours per day with a 50-pound stone on a man's head. 1st of July, 1888. My birthday today. One is getting old and feels one is doing nothing in this place. Yesterday, we killed the fattened calf and gave rations to the men, keeping as much as we wanted for ourselves. February 1889. If Stanley does not come until the end of this month, You will find the men as a rule in splendid condition. Now only 20 to 25 men get soup and meat. When we started at first, we had to give 40 rations. Emanuema died today of dysentery. Some of the Mahdists are yet very thin. One fellow was simply a skeleton. Absolutely no flesh can be seen on any part of his body. His body will not absorb the slightest particle of nutriment, I should say. I often wonder what English people would say if they knew of the way in which we go for these natives. Friendship, we don't want. As then we should get very little meat, and probably have to pay for the bananas. Every male capable of using a bow is shot. This, of course, we must do. All the children and women are taken as slaves, but the men are taken out to work in the camps. Of course they are well treated, and rarely beaten, as we whites soon stop that. After 3 or 4 weeks with the men, they get to be as happy as clams, and gorge themselves with food almost to bursting. It always seems very funny to me to see a native woman who yesterday was running wild in the bush come up to the doctor with the rest of the men and slaves for medicine for her ulcers.